I used to think the greatest pain in life was betrayal, but no. The real pain is being seen by your own parents as a living disappointment, while your little sister is cherished like a precious gem. I'll never forget the time my mother told the neighbor, "Ruby is a bit different. But little Lucy, she's the real pride of our family." Different? Do they even realize how cruel it feels to be treated like a smudge on their perfect painting? They don't. Or worse, they do and just don't care. If you think I'm exaggerating, let me tell you everything from the beginning. My name is Ruby, 33 years old, an American woman living in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm a manager at an independent bookstore in the historic district, a small place filled with old books and the comforting smell of aged wood. I have a master's degree in English literature, and I'm working on the manuscript for my first novel. Sounds decent, right? But to my parents, it's just a life of waiting for something real, a temporary stepping stone, a weird little thing I'm doing before I get back to reality. Meanwhile, Lucy, my sister who's 4 years younger, is the shining star of the Hadley family. Every photo in the house has her at the center, beaming in evening gowns, prestigious degrees, and dozens of trophies. They sent Lucy to a top university in California, covered all her tuition, a private apartment, and a brand new car for convenience. Me, I had to take out student loans, work shifts at the campus cafe, and still remember my dad coldly saying, "If you're choosing to study literature, then you better at least learn to support yourself." I used to think maybe they were just being practical. But the older I got, the more I realized, favoritism isn't accidental, it's intentional. Every decision in the house revolved around Lucy. When I said I wanted to study writing in Vermont, my mom shot it down hard. "How do you plan to make a living? Are you going to keep dreaming forever? Do something practical like Lucy." I stayed silent that time, not because I agreed, but because I knew, arguing with someone who's chosen not to see you, only makes it easier for them to look away. The breaking point came when I was 25 and Lucy threw an engagement party at a lakeside mansion in Connecticut. My parents spent over $180,000 to make the event look like it was straight out of a luxury wedding magazine. I was invited as the sister, with no offer of financial help, even though I was drowning in student debt. The only thing I brought was a borrowed dress and a forced smile. When I gave Lucy a leather-bound journal, a personal gift for her to write about her new life, she just gave a dry chuckle. "Oh, classic Ruby. So artsy." Every time I showed up at the house, I felt like an object nobody wanted to display. My mom would sigh when I talked about the book I was writing, as if I were wasting precious time on a pointless game. My dad would just ask, "Have you thought about becoming a teacher? At least there's a pension." I'm not jealous of Lucy, truly I'm not. She's beautiful, charismatic, always knows how to light up a room. What chokes me up is the way the whole family acts like I'm not someone to be proud of. Family dinners are like performances where I always play the side character, or the silent one. "Lucy just got promoted, Ruby," my mom would beam. "And you? Anything new at the bookstore?" That tone, sweet, yet full of condescension, stabbed me like thorns. When Lucy got married, my parents gave her a nearly $2 million house in Boston. It was filled with imported furniture, marble fireplaces, and an English-style rose garden. I stood in the rain on moving day soaked, holding a card I'd scraped together to buy after saving all week. My mom beamed. "See, Lucy finally has a place to start her family, and room for the kids." Me, they never once asked if I wanted a family. To them, I've always been the one living on the sidelines. I've grown used to that feeling. The feeling of being the extra in my own life story. But what they don't know is I'm still writing. Every night, under a dim yellow lamp in my little apartment above the bookstore, I type words no one in my family has ever asked about. I don't write for them. I write so I can still be myself, while the world turns its back. And if you think the story ends here, you're wrong. I never expected everything in my life to change because of a crumpled lottery ticket and a rainy walk to a corner store. It was a gray Thursday morning and I walked into Mr. Harris's shop, the silver-haired man who's run the counter for over 30 years, just to buy a cheap coffee and a small muffin. I had exactly $5 left in my wallet. I saw the blinking sign, Power Win Jackpot, $94 million. And laughed out loud. All I'm missing is a miracle, I muttered, then bought a ticket, using up the last of my cash. Ruby, if you win, buy this old store back, Mr. Harris joked in his raspy voice with a smirk. I'll buy the whole block, I replied dryly, not believing a word I said. 3 days later I had almost forgotten about it, until Mr. Harris called out as I was leaving the store. Ruby, wait. Did you check your ticket? I froze. No. I don't even remember where I put it. Your ticket's the winning one. I watched the live draw last night. Every number. I nearly fell off my chair. I stiffened. My canvas bag suddenly felt like it weighed a ton. I searched like a madwoman, my heart pounding, and then I pulled out the wrinkled ticket, still stained with a coffee mark along the edge. I opened my phone and went to the official website. 7, 16, 21, 30, 44, 45, 58. I looked at the ticket, then back at the screen. Once. Twice. My hands shook and I nearly collapsed. Mr. Harris came out from behind the counter and caught me like I was a fainting child. Sit down, Ruby, breathe. You just won $94 million. With Power Play. It's over $97 million. I couldn't say a word. I just stared at him, my mind spinning like I'd been hit over the head. Mr. Harris quietly poured me a glass of water, then placed a hand on my shoulder. Now listen to me. Don't call anyone. Don't say a word. No internet. No Facebook, no Mom, no Lucy. No one. You need to sign the back of that ticket, right now. My hands trembled as I pulled a pen from my bag and scribbled my name, Ruby Hadley, shakily. My hand shook so badly I had to rewrite it 3 times on the back of the ticket. Mr. Harris nodded, his eyes more serious than I'd ever seen. Now give me the ticket, I'll keep it in the store's safe, and, gonna call my daughter, Sharon, a financial attorney. She's good and discreet. You need a team. Immediately. I could only nod. An hour later I sat in a small office behind the grocery store across from Sharon. A woman around 40, hair neatly tied up, wearing a white button-down shirt and dark jeans. Not what I pictured a lawyer would look like. But her eyes were sharp and cold as steel. First thing, Ruby, she said bluntly, we need to set up a trust. Then 2 shell companies. Every asset you buy going forward will be under legal entities, not your name. And most importantly, you cannot appear publicly. If possible, change your phone number and email. You think my family will track you down? Not just your family, old classmates, co-workers, someone who borrowed $3 from you in 2011. Trust me. I swallowed hard. I don't want anyone to know. Sharon looked at me and nodded. Then this is the first step in protecting yourself. In the next 2 weeks, everything moved like a storm. I quietly quit my job at the bookstore, leaving the owner enough money to hire 3 employees for the next 2 years. I moved out of my old apartment, leaving behind my bookshelves and that worn-out armchair I loved, and bought a small house in the suburbs of Providence through the trust. The house had a backyard, a reading room with big windows facing a flaming red maple, and a cozy kitchen. No one knew where I lived, no one knew I had money, and for the first time in many years, I didn't have to ask permission to live the way I wanted. I sat in my new office, a sunlit room with bookshelves from floor to ceiling, looking at the lottery ticket now sealed safely away, and felt my heart heavy and light at the same time. Something was shifting. Not just the numbers in my bank account. The silence of my phone felt strange. No more texts from my mom about mandatory family dinners. No guilt-tripping voicemails from Lucy. No one calling me the writer who refuses to grow up. Just me, blank pages, and an entirely new future. Waiting to be rewritten by my own hand. And then the phone rang. Not Sharon. Not Mr. Harris. It was Lucy. I didn't pick up. I used to think my dream was to write books. But after holding a winning lottery ticket worth $97 million, I realized the real dream wasn't writing. It was giving people the power to write who had never been heard. And I started with the silence my family forced me to live in for so many years. 3 weeks after claiming the prize, I stood inside an old building buried deep in the abandoned warehouse district of East Providence. 4 stories of crumbling red brick, a leaking roof, cracked glass windows. The broker shook his head and said, "This place should just be torn down." I looked through the rusted window frame, saw the late afternoon sun filtering through the dusty glass and hitting the splintered wood floor. Only one thought echoed in my mind. This will be the beginning of every story that's been buried. 3 months later, it became the official headquarters of Silver Ink Press, a publishing company I founded to support writers who had been overlooked for being not mainstream or not marketable. The name Silver Ink was to remind myself, even the dreams that have been scratched and worn can still shine, if we dare to rewrite them in silver ink. I didn't hire people the usual way. My first editor was Jess, a single mom who used to be a school librarian, fired when the district slashed funding. My cover designer was Caleb, a black man who'd been rejected by every big ad agency for having a style unsuitable for the market. Each person came to me carrying a frustration, and I gave them a chance, not out of kindness, but because I knew exactly what the world was missing by turning its back on them. We hosted our first book launch for a small poetry collection by Linda, a 60-year-old former nurse who wrote about grief and healing after losing her husband to cancer. No one wanted to publish her poems, no market, the traditional publishers said. I printed her book on the finest paper with embossed ink, and held a cozy signing event right in the lobby of our newly restored building. Nearly 200 people showed up. Linda cried when she saw her name on the cover. "I thought my life was already over," she whispered. "No," I replied. "It's just beginning." I didn't stop there. I created the Everyone's Writing Corner program, a free writing class initiative for kids, seniors, immigrants, and anyone who never had the chance to learn how to tell their own stories. The third-floor room of Silver Ink Press was transformed into a classroom with chalkboard walls, round tables, and a free library shelf. Each week I set aside one session to teach basic writing to middle school students from low-income public schools. One time, a boy named Marcus, 13, shy, quiet, showed me a comic book draft he had drawn himself. Rough pencil lines, the main character was a gray bear with sad eyes and a tagline, "I don't need to be understood, just heard." I took that draft, gave it to Caleb to redesign, and we released a limited print edition for the program. At the signing event, Marcus froze when he saw his book had a real ISBN number and was placed next to Harry Potter on the shelf. I thought, "This was just a dream," he whispered. "No," I gently squeezed his hand. "You just woke up in a world you wrote yourself into." I didn't tell anyone in my family. I didn't tell Lucy that I was running a socially driven publishing house with dozens of literacy projects in motion. I didn't email my mother or father to let them know I'd invested over $2 million into local cultural development programs. Because I knew they'd only ask, "Does it make a profit?" I don't need them to understand. I'm not doing this for revenge. But I'm also not doing it to earn back validation from people who never believed I had worth. Every book I print, every writer I help, is a silent slap against the label they stamped on me for life. Ruby is just a dreamer. Wrong. I don't just dream. I turn dreams into tools, into weapons, into foundations. And then, on a Monday morning, while Jess and I were sorting through the manuscript of an immigrant author, my phone rang again. "Lucy." 3rd time that week. The message popped up. "I saw your company in the news. Looks nice, but if you're still family, can you help me a little? James lost his job. We're about to lose the house." I locked the screen, set the phone down, and kept reading the manuscript. Written in broken but heartfelt English, by a Mexican woman who had just completed her ESL class. I want to write about my mother, about how she taught me to make soup from whatever was left at the end of the day. I smiled. There was nothing marketable in that sentence, but it was more alive than any financial report Lucy ever bragged about. I looked up at the white wall behind my desk, where a quote from Toni Morrison hung. "If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it." I'm writing that book, and I have no intention of stopping. I knew that moment would come, I just didn't expect it so soon. Saturday morning I had just brewed coffee, hadn't even sat down to read a manuscript when the doorbell rang, fast and urgent, like the house was on fire. I looked at the security camera screen. It was them. Lucy stood at the door, cream-colored dress, hair curled perfectly, like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. My mother was fussing with my father's collar, while my father, wearing sunglasses, tried unsuccessfully to hide how uncomfortable he looked. They stood there, all three of them, as if this were a friendly visit, not the first time they'd come looking for me after years of only referring to me as the stubborn one. I opened the door. "Hi, Ruby," my mother said first, voice stiff. "How have you been?" "I'm fine, come in," I replied, stepping aside. No expression. No hug. They walked into the living room as if entering a strange new world. My father looked up at the high ceiling and crystal chandelier. Lucy glanced around the room filled with books and natural light from the large glass windows. "Oh," Lucy said. "Did you decorate all this yourself?" "I hired an interior designer, but I picked every book on the shelves myself." She gave a weak laugh. It's nice." My mother sat down on the gray velvet chair, placing her leather handbag on her lap. She looked at me, her eyes a mix of curiosity and caution. "Ruby, we need to talk." I sat across from them, hands on the oak table, calm to the point of cold. "I'm guessing this has to do with the lottery?" My father cleared his throat. "News spreads fast. The article in the Providence Times, your name was on the front page." "Oh, so now you read the local paper?" I tilted my head, half smiling. Back then, when I had a tiny feature, no one in this family even noticed. Lucy cut in, her voice sickeningly sweet. "We didn't come here to rehash the past, Ruby. Honestly, we're happy for you. Really." "Are you?" I leaned forward, pulled 3 thick white envelopes from the drawer under the table, and placed them on the surface one by one deliberately. "Good. Because I've prepared a very honest gift for each of you." They looked at the envelopes like they might explode at any moment. "Lucy." I slid one envelope toward her. "Inside is a check for $15,000, the amount you borrowed from me back in 2016 to start your online cosmetics store. You said you'd pay me back, but then conveniently forgot." Lucy blushed. "Ruby, that was a long time ago." "Exactly. And I'm not waiting one more day." I pushed the second envelope forward. "This one's for Mom and Dad. $22,500. It covers every expense you ever spent on me from childhood. I have a notebook detailing each item: birthdays, elementary school tuition, first bicycle. I even factored in inflation and bank interest." My mother's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and saw the check printed with the name of a financial firm. She didn't say a word. Just sat there in stunned silence. The last envelope I kept for myself. I looked up at them. "This one contains the business plan, company documents for Silver Ink Press, and all the community initiatives I've been running. Nothing in here required the family's approval. I did it alone. No borrowing, no favors." "Ruby," my father finally spoke, his voice lower now. "You're misunderstanding. We're family. We don't keep score like this." "No keeping score?" I let out a laugh, but there was no joy in it. "So when you spent hundreds of thousands on Lucy's wedding without even asking if I could afford lunch, that wasn't keeping score? When you refused to co-sign my student loan but bought Lucy a brand new car, that wasn't keeping score either?" "We were concerned about you," my mother whispered. "Because you always chose such a different path." No, you were concerned because I wasn't Lucy, and now that I have money, suddenly I matter again. Don't act like it's anything else. The room fell silent. I stood up and opened the door. I don't need any of the three of you. But I know exactly who needs who now. Lucy clutched her handbag tightly, her voice sharp. You think you're better than us, just because you got lucky. I didn't respond. I just looked her straight in the eyes. And finally, Lucy looked down. My mother slowly stood up, tears beginning to fall. Ruby, you may not forgive us, but don't push us away like this. I know I was wrong. I shook my head slightly. You weren't wrong for playing favorites. You were wrong for never seeing who I was. And now that I don't live to please anyone anymore, suddenly you see me. I didn't close the door right away when they left. I stood there, watching the three of them disappear behind the row of purple lavender bushes. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace. Not angry, not bitter, just free. I used to think that once I made my stand, they'd disappear from my life. But no, family doesn't know how to walk away when they need money. 3 months after that final visit, the messages started coming. At first, they were polite, regular, like a quiet knock in the middle of the night. Ruby, I hope you're well. Your father's been a little under the weather. Please call when you can. Hey sis, I just read the article about Silver Ink, so proud of you, hope to hear from you soon. I didn't reply. I didn't delete them either, I just read. And stayed silent. Then the tone changed, the fake softness disappeared, replaced by raw desperation. Ruby, I'm begging you, your father's company is being sued for fraudulent bankruptcy, we're about to lose the house. Sis, I have nowhere to go. James made a bad investment, the bank froze our accounts. Please help me, okay? There was a time I craved hearing the word sorry. But now, even when they were asking, they couldn't bother to include the word apology. They asked for money, for forgiveness, for a place back in my life, but never for forgiveness. For treating me like garbage beneath Lucy's feet. I kept working. Silver Ink Press was expanding. We had just signed 3 young authors from the South Boston projects and were preparing to publish their short story collection. The editorial department was running at full speed, dozens of manuscripts arrived each week. I lived in books, in honest voices and the hunger to be heard by people the world had ignored. But they still wouldn't disappear. One Friday afternoon, I had just left the office and was driving home when I saw Lucy standing at my gate. Her silk dress was wrinkled, her hair a tangled mess. She didn't look like the Lucy I once knew. The always polished, always perfect Lucy, who used to mock me for dressing like an old maid. I got out of the car, locked the door, and didn't rush over. She stepped closer, eyes red and swollen. I don't have anywhere else to go. I crossed my arms and stood still. Do you remember the last thing you said to me, Lucy? You said, I thought I was better than everyone because I won the lottery. Do you remember that? I was angry. I was hurt. No, you were ashamed because I succeeded without needing help from anyone. You were afraid to face the truth. That even though Mom and Dad poured every resource into you, you still couldn't build anything that lasted. Lucy broke down in tears. You're right, James. He invested in crypto. Over $500,000, gone. The house was seized, the car towed. I'm staying with a friend, but they're moving soon too. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for a chance. I looked at my sister. The one who took all the praise, all the expectations, all the validation from our parents and never once felt guilty. Now, stripped down, shattered, nothing left but bare hands and a crushed pride. I opened the gate. Come in. But only for 10 minutes. We sat on the porch, where I usually read in the mornings. Lucy held the hot cup of tea I made, her hands trembling. Have you called Mom? I asked. I did. She's got nothing left either. Dad's company is under investigation, their credit cards are frozen. They've hired a private lawyer to try and avoid personal liability, but it's not looking good. And now suddenly they all remember me." Lucy said nothing, then whispered, "They think you'll forgive. Like, you always used to." I sighed, staring into the distance. "Back then I needed them. Now I don't." "You're still a good person, right?" "Ah?" Lucy looked at me, eyes wide, like a lost child. "You're not going to let your family fall apart, are you?" I set my cup of tea down. "You're right. I am a good person. But being good doesn't mean turning myself into a wallet for other people to drain. Being good never earned me their respect. They looked down on me for it." She choked up. "So, you're not going to help?" I stood up. "I will help, just not the way they expect." I pulled 3 file folders from my bag and laid them on the table. Is an assistant manager position at the local arts center. You volunteered there back in college. 2 is an event coordinator role at a nonprofit that Silver Ink is sponsoring. 3 is the free writing class I run. You can help students with storytelling." Lucy looked at the folders like I'd handed her a pile of bricks. "You want me to actually work? From the ground up, just like I did." "What about money?" "There's no money, just work." "And a choice." She shot up, eyes flashing with anger. "You're getting revenge." "No. I'm giving you what Mom and Dad never gave me. A real start." Lucy didn't say anything else. She picked up the folders and quietly walked out the gate, like someone wandering through the ruins of a dream. I stayed there, gripping my now cold teacup. I knew the storm wasn't over. Because my mother and father, they wouldn't let things end so quietly. That evening, the sky over Providence turned amber, and the warm lights glowed across the glass panes of the 3-story building where Silver Ink Press had officially launched. We had transformed the old warehouse into a vibrant space. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, illustrations by authors hanging on every wall, and a small stage in the corner for live readings. I stood in the center of the grand hall, in a simple black dress, holding a glass of white wine, watching everyone, authors, readers, journalists, and students from our community programs, smiling, talking, and living in a world where words held more weight than status or money. It was my night, and, like a curse that never misses its cue, they came. I saw them the moment they stepped through the revolving glass door, my mother in a pale blue evening gown, face carefully made up but still worn with exhaustion, my father behind her, suit wrinkled, heels of his shoes scuffed. And Lucy, still beautiful, but this time without the pride in her eyes. They moved through the crowd without greeting anyone, without looking around, heading straight for me. I wasn't surprised. "Ruby," my mother spoke first, her smile trembling. You really did it." "Without anyone's help," I replied, taking a sip of wine, my eyes locked on hers. My father looked around, his voice low. "We need to talk. Urgently." I nodded and pointed toward the small meeting room at the end of the hallway, the one with soundproof walls and frosted glass doors. "In there." We sat across from each other. I didn't offer them water. There was no need for niceties on a battlefield. Lucy spoke first, her voice hoarse. "We're about to lose everything. James left. The bank sent the foreclosure notice on the house." My mother jumped in. "Your father's company. It's officially bankrupt. No savings left, no shares. No insurance? Nothing at all." I crossed my arms, eyes landing on my father. "And now you thought of me?" He nodded without lifting his head. "We're family, Ruby." I stood up and opened a file case I had prepared in advance, pulling out 3 folders and placing them on the table like turning over cards of fate. "No money, but there are options." They stared at me, unblinking. I slid the first folder toward my mother. "Mom, the community nursing home on the south side is hiring an activities manager. They're looking for someone with communication skills who can plan events for the elderly. Your profile fits. They agreed to an interview next week. My mother's eyes widened. You mean, go back to work? No, I mean start over. I turned to my father and handed him the second folder. A nonprofit startup focused on community education is looking for a part-time financial advisor. The pay isn't high, but they need someone with experience. He gripped the folder tightly. You do know I used to manage millions of dollars, right? And lost it all too, I replied coldly. This is a chance to rebuild. No power, no title, just work, and learning to build something from scratch. Finally, I pushed the last folder toward Lucy. There's an event coordinator position at the Community Arts Center. They know you worked in wedding planning. This is a first step. Real work. Not high-paying, but stable. Lucy looked at me, tears in her eyes. Do you really believe I can do it? You can, but this time, no one's clearing the path for you. You walk it yourself. My mother started crying. Ruby, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. We should have supported you, not forced you to be like Lucy, but now you're the only one who hasn't turned your back on this family. I stood up, resting a hand on the back of my chair. I haven't turned my back. But I'm not opening my wallet either. From now on, you'll have to stand on your own feet, just like I did. My father cleared his throat. And if we refuse? Then I wish you the best of luck, but I'm not a bailout fund. No one said another word. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of jazz music from the lobby filled the silence. Finally, Lucy gave a small nod. I'll try. I looked at my sister. For the first time in years I saw sincerity in her eyes. My father picked up the folder and exhaled like he'd just set down a heavy weight. And my mother, still not raising her head, held my hand tightly as she walked out of the room. Once they were gone, I returned to the main hall. Jess came up beside me, her eyes full of concern. You okay? I nodded, better than ever. The program continued. Our youngest author, little Eliza, age 12, was signing her very first comic book. She spotted me and ran over, eyes shining. Miss Ruby, they're lining up for my autograph. I knelt down, smoothing her hair. You deserve it. No titles, no inherited legacy. I built all of this from doubt and rejection. And tonight, as the ones who once turned their backs on me took their first steps into the real world, I knew I had won. That morning, I was watering the lavender pots on the porch, lavenders I brought back from the community garden in South Providence, when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. The screen lit up with a name that made me pause for a second. Lucy. The message was just one line, simple but holding far more weight than any of the hollow excuses I'd ever received from her. Hey, I have my first interview at the Arts Center tomorrow. Any advice? I sat down on the long porch bench, phone still in hand. I read the message again. No exclamation mark, no emoji, no attempt to soften the words with fake humor. Just an honest question. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. A flash of Lucy in her $10,000 wedding gown appeared in my mind, standing in the middle of that glittering celebration, with candles, crystals, and violins. Back then, I stood on the sidelines, forcing a smile. A faded shadow, always used as the comparison. And now, that same Lucy, the one who once mocked my dreams, was asking for advice on a real job. Not advice about which wedding gown photographs best, not about perfume brands, or how to impress at soulless charity galas. I texted back. Be yourself, but the real you, not the version everyone else expects. A minute later, Lucy replied with a heart emoji. That was it. No overthinking, no extra words, and for the first time, I saw someone changing in that message. I put my phone down, stood up, and resumed watering the plants. The scent of damp soil rose, blending with the lavender's sweetness. A gentle breeze rustled the curtain behind me. Inside the house, my debut novel manuscript sat on my writing desk, ready for one last edit before printing. The book I wrote on lonely nights, in that damp upstairs room above the old bookstore. I wrote it out of pain, from dreams that were trampled, and a small hope that one day, I would no longer be the shadow behind Lucy. Now, I wasn't behind anyone, I stood exactly where I belonged. At the front. That afternoon I headed to Silver Ink Press for the signing ceremony of 4 young authors from our community writing program. 3 of them were immigrants. The 4th was a veteran who had once been homeless. Each one held their manuscript like it was their dream in physical form. As they signed their first ever publishing contracts, I realized, this is what truly matters. Not the money in the bank, not the flattering press, but real change. From people who once believed they had no voice. That evening, I sat in my usual reading corner in the backyard. The moon rose slowly, its gentle light shining over the freshly trimmed lawn. Beside me was a handwritten letter from a 14-year-old boy in our free downtown writing class. Miss Ruby, if it weren't for your class, I don't think I'd ever have dared to write about my mom. You made me believe that kids like me have something worth saying. I held the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the keepsake box of life's most precious moments. In that box there was nothing luxurious. Just letters like his, a few scribbled drawings from kids, my first manuscript draft, and one faded lottery ticket, still bearing my signature on the back. I smiled. Not because I won the lottery, but because I didn't let the money define me. I used it like a pen, to rewrite my life, and to help others begin their own stories. My phone rang again, this time it was from Mom. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring through, then opened the message. Ruby, I just wanted to say, you looked radiant today. And I'm sorry for never believing you could be like this. I read slowly. One word, then another. I'm sorry. For the first time, it wasn't about needing money, or because of failure, or fear, or collapsed pride. It was a genuine apology. I didn't reply, not because I hadn't forgiven her, but because I was busy living, fully, freely. As I closed my notebook and looked up at the moon, I knew. My victory was never about wealth. My victory was this: I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. And I, Ruby Hadley, had become the woman I once dreamed of being. From those old pages, full of handwritten words and tears. My story isn't about winning the lottery. It's about finding myself again, through the rejection and judgment of my own family. From someone once overlooked, I rebuilt my life with my own hands and unwavering heart. True wealth isn't in a number. It's in living authentically, empowering others, and no longer needing validation from those who once denied me. That's the greatest victory. Peace, freedom, and real worth. What do you think about Ruby's journey and the choices she made with her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories about family and life. I never thought my hands would shake just from turning over a piece of paper. But that afternoon, in the living room where I grew up, my hands truly trembled. My eyes were locked on the cold, impersonal lines printed across the legal documents spread over the ebony wood table. The very documents I had secretly safeguarded for years with everything I had. Across from me, my younger brother Jacob was wearing a smug, almost terrifying smile, as if he had just won a life or math chess game I didn't even know I was playing. Sitting beside him, my parents sat upright, faces beaming like they'd just accomplished something sacred. We're officially signing the transfer of Ravenhill to Jacob today, my father announced, his eyes glowing with pride. None of them knew that nearly 2 decades ago, my grandfather, Franklin Westbrook, had quietly established a trust in his own name, and the sole legal trustee with full control over Ravenhill was me. I'm Charlie Westbrook, the eldest daughter in a prestigious family of attorneys spanning 3 generations in the state of Virginia. The 3-story granite mansion known as Ravenhill, nestled atop a green hill just outside Charlottesville, is the symbol of our family's legacy. A place that has hosted weddings, funerals, and summer parties the entire community looked forward to. I moved out when I started working in Washington, D.C., but I never missed returning on the second weekend of every month. A tradition my parents clung to like it was the last breath of their golden era. This time was no different. I received a message from my mother. "Come home this weekend, sweetheart. We have some wonderful news to share. Jacob and Jessica will be there too." No hints, no details. I suspected nothing, just assumed it was another family gathering like always. I had no idea I was about to witness the most calculated betrayal of my life. My green pickup truck pulled up in front of the wrought iron gate, the same one I used to chalk doodles on when I was 8. Beyond it, Raven Hill still stood tall, its light gray roof glinting in the sun, climbing roses covering the front porch. Thanks to the gardener I paid for every month. I stepped out, carrying a bottle of 2010 Bordeaux, my father's favorite, part of a ritual I always honored. When I set foot on the Italian tile foyer, the familiar scent of old oak and soft lavender hit me in the chest. This was still my home. At least, I used to believe so. "Charlie! You're here!" My mother, Marilyn, came out from the kitchen, still holding a dish towel, her silver hair neatly pinned back. She hugged me. Briefly, distractedly, like she had something more urgent on her mind. "Everyone's in the study. Go on in, your father wants to talk." I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard laughter from the next room. Walking through the tall glass doors, I saw my father, Donald, leaning over a thick stack of papers with Jacob and Jessica. Each of them held a glass of whiskey. The celebration had already started, without me. "Perfect timing, Charlie." My father looked up, his voice full of excitement. He's 68 now, but still carries the commanding presence of a seasoned lawyer. Perfectly styled salt and pepper hair, expensive tie immaculately straight. "We just finalized the agreement to transfer Ravenhill to Jacob. Everything will be completed within the next 2 weeks." I stood frozen. It felt like someone had hit me square in the forehead. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense, even as they echoed in my head. Transfer Ravenhill to Jacob. I couldn't comprehend why. Why him? Jacob turned toward me, eyes gleaming with triumph. "You know, I think the timing is perfect. Jessica and I are starting a family. Ravenhill will be the perfect home." Jessica smiled awkwardly, clearly unsure of what to say. She was the polished type, always standing by her husband's side, never looking at me for more than 3 seconds. I tried to stay calm. My voice was low and steady. "Did either of you ever consider talking to me first? Or was this decision already made?" My father sighed, as if I had asked something completely unreasonable. "You live in the city, busy with your work at the museum. You've never shown interest in staying at Ravenhill. Meanwhile, Jacob works at the family law firm, and Jessica's expecting. This just makes the most sense." I couldn't say a word. I couldn't even bring myself to explain that for the past 10 years, I had been the one paying the property taxes, fixing the leaking roof, and covering the gardener's wages, all from my grandfather's trust fund, which only the family lawyer and I knew about. They were preparing to hand over something they didn't even legally own. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. I set the wine bottle down on the table and turned to face Jacob, my 32-year-old brother, coddled like he was the center of the universe, and silently thought to myself, "You think Ravenhill is yours? Just wait." I left Ravenhill that afternoon with a lump burning in my throat. The anger didn't explode. It simmered, searing every thought from the inside out. I drove down the hill, past the gravel road leading back into downtown Charlottesville, trying not to slam the gas pedal. If Jacob knew that just 3 years ago that house was on the brink of foreclosure, his smug little smile might just fade away. For over a decade, I had lived like a shadow in my own family, always present, always reliable, but never truly seen. I started transferring money to Ravenhill when I was 26, right after landing my first job at the Museum of American History in D.C. My grandfather, Franklin Westbrook, had just passed away. Before he died, he called me into his study, where a portrait of his younger self still hung behind the leather armchair. He handed me a thick sealed envelope and said something I've never forgotten. "Ravenhill isn't just land. It's the blood and bones of this family. I chose you, Charlie, not because you're the eldest, but because you're the only one who truly understands what that means." Inside the envelope were the documents of a trust my grandfather had established when I was 11. The name Franklin Westbrook Trust was clearly printed on the paperwork. An independent legal trust that owned Ravenhill and the entire surrounding estate, with me as the sole legal trustee after his death. The only condition: keep everything secret until the protection of Ravenhill must come to light. And I kept that promise. For 10 years I told no one, not a word to my parents, or to Jacob. I let them continue to believe they were in charge, and while they were blind to the truth, I gritted my teeth and covered every debt the estate incurred, from property taxes to the roof repairs in 2016, even replacing the entire plumbing system that had rusted since the 80s. Each year I transferred around $40,000 from my personal account into the trust. Money I could have used to buy my own home, travel, or even invest in my future. I gave it all up. My father, Donald, never asked how I was doing in D.C., only why I hadn't bought a new car after working for so many years. My mother was gentler, but the way she brushed past everything I said about my work, as if preserving historical artifacts was just a hobby, cut deeper than silence. Meanwhile, Jacob was treated like royalty. He got a brand new BMW the moment he graduated from law school, and I still remember the gleam in my mother's eyes when he showed off the keys at dinner while I quietly picked at my vegetables. That same year I had been awarded a full doctoral scholarship in cultural heritage conservation, but no one mentioned it. They only asked, "What are you going to do with that degree? Become a librarian?" I gave a strained smile, and kept sending money to Ravenhill. Once, I asked my father why no one ever acknowledged my role in keeping Ravenhill running. He replied with just one sentence: "You don't need recognition to do the right thing, Charlie. If you do, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons." That hollow philosophy sounded noble, until it came from someone who had just removed his daughter's name from the inheritance list without a single conversation. I'm not stupid. I know Ravenhill is no longer a legacy to them, it's an asset. And in the game of assets, Jacob is the shinier piece. He's the son, the lawyer in the family firm, married and expecting a child. All the things my parents see as right and continuity. I, on the other hand, am a 36-year-old single woman, working in a museum, renting an apartment in Georgetown. I don't fit into the traditional picture they've painted, even though I'm the only one who's kept that place from falling apart. I didn't speak up, not once. Even when I saw the $18,000 invoice for repainting the porch they sent to our shared email and my father casually forwarded it with, "Can you take care of this for me?" I still said nothing. I still paid. I did it for my grandfather, because I knew he believed in me. But that day, when I heard my father say that Ravenhill will belong to Jacob and Jessica in 2 weeks, something cracked inside me. Not with a loud noise, but like a hairline fracture in a column. Quiet, but irreversible. I knew it was time to use my voice. And more than that, it was time to bring the Franklin Westbrook Trust into the light. I didn't sleep at all that night. The yellow lamplight reflecting on the ceiling of my small Georgetown apartment made me feel like I was exposed in a public square. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jacob's grinning face beside that thick stack of papers. Transfer of Ravenhill. I could still hear every word, like they were tapping against my temples one by one. By the time the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains, I had made up my mind. I brewed a strong cup of coffee and opened the safe in my bookshelf, where I kept the original documents of the Franklin Westbrook Trust, along with legal papers and financial records from the past 10 years. All of it was backed up, notarized, and meticulously organized. If needed, it would take me less than an hour to prove that Ravenhill was not my parents' property, and that they had no legal right to transfer it to anyone, including Jacob. But the hard part wasn't the law. The hard part was me. I had stayed silent for so long. If I suddenly pushed back, they would see me as a traitor, nothing more. They wouldn't care about the truth. They would only feel humiliated. Because I dared to expose them. In a game they thought they had already won. And worst of all, I wasn't sure I wanted them to know. Because once I said it, everything would change. There would be no room left for kindness, or for whatever they thought family unity was. I would become the obstacle in their succession plan, and I knew my father, Donald, would do whatever it took to regain control. Even if it meant taking his own daughter to court. But I couldn't let them keep acting illegally. This wasn't just my issue anymore. It was my grandfather's legacy. The legal responsibility he entrusted to me. I had no right to ignore it just because I didn't want to cause trouble. I knew I needed legal backup. The only person who could help me now was Helen Carter, my grandfather's personal attorney, and the one who helped him set up the trust back in 2002. Helen is 72 now, semi-retired but still maintaining a small office downtown. I scheduled a meeting with her that morning at 10 a.m., at a discreet cafe near City Hall. When I arrived, she was already there, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, her eyes as sharp as the day I first met her at my grandfather's funeral. "Charlie," she said, her voice low and smooth like old jazz. "You're here about Ravenhill, aren't you?" I nodded and pulled the folder from my leather bag. She read every page carefully, not skipping a single comma. When she reached the section naming me as sole trustee, she gave a slight nod. "The documents are intact. Everything is still legally binding. The Franklin Westbrook Trust is the sole legal owner of the Ravenhill estate. No one has the right to transfer that property without your written consent. Not even your parents." I swallowed hard. Hearing it from a lawyer wasn't like saying it to myself. It carried weight. It was truth with authority. "But if I speak up," I hesitated, "everything will fall apart. They'll never see me the same again." "They never saw you for who you truly are, Charlie," Helen said, her tone firm and unsentimental. "And by letting them keep breaking the law, you're betraying the one person who believed in you more than anyone. Your grandfather." I had nothing left to say. She handed me a new business card. "In case you need me to step in officially. But I suggest you take control of the narrative. Don't let them find out the truth from the title office. That would be worse." That afternoon, when I returned to my office at the museum, I found an email from my mother waiting. Subject line: "Urgent. Need your signature ASAP. Dear Charlie, your dad just sent the Ravenhill transfer documents to Jacob's lawyer, and they need you to sign a waiver to officially relinquish your inheritance rights. It's simple, nothing serious, just a legal formality. I know you're busy, so I already printed the papers and will bring them home this Saturday for you to sign. Thank you. Love you, Mom." I stared at that last line. Just a legal formality. Everything is always simple to them, unless it involves power. I took a deep breath and typed a single sentence. "Mom, I think it's time we have an honest conversation about Ravenhill. And about Grandpa." I hit send. And in that moment I knew. There was no turning back. I arrived at the old law office on the third floor of a red brick building near Court Square at 3 p.m. sharp. The frosted glass door bore faded silver lettering, "Carter and Morgan, Legal Counsel since 1962. I had come here a few times with Grandpa as a child, swinging my legs on an oak chair while he and the lawyer talked about something loud and secret. Today, I returned. Not as an 8-year-old girl, but as the one holding what my family didn't know existed. The legal ownership of Ravenhill. Helen wasn't in today, but she had arranged for me to meet Mr. Samuel Morgan, the firm's co-founder, now 78 years old, and the man who had personally helped my grandfather draft the Franklin Westbrook Trust. The secretary led me into a walnut-paneled room, where the afternoon sun filtered through bamboo blinds, casting a soft glow on the faded Turkish rug. Samuel sat behind his desk, holding a cup of tea, horn-rimmed glasses resting low on his nose. When I stepped in, he looked up, his blue-gray eyes gleaming with the sharpness of someone well acquainted with other people's secrets. "Charlie Westbrook?" he said, his voice low and gravelly like burned wood. "You've grown up." I nodded. "I think it's time we talk about Ravenhill." Without any further explanation, I placed the file on the table. He opened it and turned each page slowly. Every flip of a page sliced away another illusion my parents had built over the years. "Original copies," I said, "with tax payment records and annual maintenance expenses. Everything was paid through the trust account. Except in some urgent cases, where I transferred funds from my personal account." Mr. Morgan said nothing for a long while. After reviewing everything, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the armrest. "You know," he began, "very few people keep their promises to the dead for this long. Franklin once told me, Charlie won't need to be recognized to do what's right. But I want to make sure that when the time comes, she won't be alone." I froze. Mr. Morgan opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope, carefully sealed with red wax. "He left this for you, told me to give it to you only if the trust was ever in jeopardy, or when you were mature enough to decide what's right." I took it. On the front was that familiar handwriting. "For Charlie, when the time comes." My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a long letter, written in blue ink on thick paper. His handwriting was still there. Bold, steady, full of conviction. "My dearest Charlie. If you're reading this, it means you've reached the moment I've always feared. When Ravenhill is no longer a symbol of tradition, but a battleground for power and selfishness. I didn't choose you because you're the oldest, or because you're a girl. I chose you because you see the value of this place beyond its bricks and columns. You don't need anyone's permission to protect this legacy, you just need to remember, justice is not silence. You have the right, and the responsibility, to do what's right. I believe in you, always." I folded the letter. My eyes were dry but my throat felt like it was being crushed. Every word took me back to those days walking Ravenhill with Grandpa, as he showed me each old brick, each architectural detail, telling stories of the 5 generations who lived there. Not to brag, but to teach me to value it. Samuel placed his hand on the file, his voice firm. "Charlie, this trust is fully legal. It was established under Virginia law in 2002, properly notarized, and lists you as the sole trustee. You have full authority to approve or deny any change in ownership involving Ravenhill. No one, not even your parents, can override that without your signature." I took a deep breath. My head felt like a tightly wound string. Years of silence, of swallowing anger just to protect the illusion of a close-knit family. It was all about to end. "What if they've already signed a contract with a third party?" I asked. "Any such transaction would be immediately voided once the title office discovers the property is legally owned by the Franklin Westbrook Trust, not by Mr. Donald or Mrs. Marilyn Westbrook. But, he paused. "If you remain silent, it will evolve into a legal dispute that I can assure you will be painful and public." I looked him straight in the eye. "So now it's time to speak up?" Samuel Morgan nodded slowly. "Yes, and I'll stand with you." I left the office in silence, my grandfather's letter tucked inside my bag, heavier than anything I'd ever carried. The gray afternoon sky felt like a warning of the storm to come. And this time, I would be the one to bring it. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving Morgan's office, still gripping my grandfather's letter like it was the last shield between me and the undercurrent threatening to sweep everything away. Finally, I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my contacts to the name I'd been avoiding all week. Graham Sutton. The attorney handling Ravenhill's transfer documents. Graham was a senior partner at the law firm my father had trusted for nearly 2 decades. He was in his 40s, meticulous, sharp, and most importantly, neutral. That's why, if I wanted to stop this unauthorized transfer without turning it into a full-blown family war, Graham was my only starting point. I made the call. Sutton speaking. Hi Graham, this is Charlie Westbrook. I'd like to meet with you today, it's about Ravenhill. There was a brief pause, then his voice turned cautious. I'm currently finalizing the paperwork with Mr. Donald and Jacob. If you'd like to review the terms. No, I cut in. I'm not here to review anything. I'm here to provide information. Information that will render the entire transfer process invalid. He went silent. What did you say? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. I'll be at your office at 3 p.m. I need 45 minutes. You'll want to hear this. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. Graham met me in the lobby on the 15th floor of a sleek glass tower in downtown Charlottesville, dressed in a flawless gray suit like he'd just walked out of a global finance summit. He led me into a small private conference room. No glass walls, just a long walnut table and a polished silver tray with a carafe of water. Ms. Westbrook, he said, still guarded. I'm very curious about this information you mentioned. I opened my bag and pulled out the Franklin Westbrook Trust file, laying each page on the table like the final hand in a high-stakes game. Graham flipped through them, reading carefully. When he reached the section confirming the trust's ownership, I saw his lips press together. Then he looked up. His eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sharp alertness of a lawyer who realized he was about to be swept into a storm. You're telling me Ravenhill isn't currently owned by Mr. and Mrs. Donald? He asked slowly. I'm not just telling you, this is legal proof, I said. The trust was created in 2002, my grandfather was the founder, I am the sole legal trustee, as recorded and certified by the Albemarle County Clerk's Office. And Mr. Donald doesn't know about this. They believe they're the owners, but on paper, they've had no legal claim for over a decade. Graham leaned back in his chair, ran his hands over his face, and exhaled like someone who just learned his client had filed for bankruptcy. I'll be honest with you, Charlie. If this is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, then the entire transfer process I've been overseeing is illegal. I nodded. And I don't want it to get that far. What do you want? I looked him directly in the eye. I want to stop the transfer before it's notarized, but I don't want to use the legal card as a weapon. I want a conversation, face to face, with all parties present. And I need you, as the attorney overseeing the transfer, to be there to confirm the facts. Graham blinked. He clearly hadn't expected that. You want me to take your side? I want you to take the side of the truth. I'm not asking you to betray your clients, but if you proceed with this transfer without disclosing the existence of the trust, the court will nullify the entire deal. And that will become a scandal, not just for my family, but for your firm. He paused, then nodded slightly. I understand. A long silence followed before Graham finally spoke again. If you agree, I'll arrange a meeting at Ravenhill tomorrow evening, a family meeting. I'll inform Mr. Donald and Jacob that there are legal matters that need to be clarified. The rest? I'll leave for you to say. I tightened my grip on my handbag, my heart feeling like it was clenched in someone else's fist. But I nodded. I'll be there, with all the documents, and with the truth. Graham stood and extended his hand to me. His handshake was firm, decisive. No more hesitation. Good luck, Charlie. Looks like your family is in for a memorable evening. The next evening, light rain fell as I drove through Ravenhill's rusted iron gates. Tiny droplets traced their way down the windshield like endless question marks echoing through my mind. How will they react? Denial? Anger? Or will they finally see me differently? Jacob's SUV sat parked arrogantly right in front of the main entrance, its tires still caked with mud. I parked a little further back, beneath the old oak tree where I used to play hide-and-seek with Grandpa, then stepped out with the green leather folder clutched tightly in my hands. Inside it was everything: the trust documents, bank statements, repair receipts, property ownership records. Tonight, it would all be laid bare. The large sitting room glowed brightly as I walked in. My mother, Marilyn, stood by the fireplace holding a glass of white wine. My father, Donald, sat upright in a leather armchair, legs crossed, eyes cold as steel. Jacob lounged on the sofa, wearing the smug expression of someone who thought this meeting was just a dull formality. Graham Sutton stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. "Charlie," my mother forced a smile. "You finally made it. We were just discussing renovation plans for Ravenhill. Jacob had some great ideas for the kitchen." I didn't respond. Instead, I placed the document folder on the oak coffee table and calmly opened it. "We're not discussing kitchens tonight," I said, my voice steady and clear. "We're discussing the truth and the legal ownership of Ravenhill." The room fell silent. I pulled out the first document, the notarized copy of the Franklin Westbrook Trust, and slid it toward my father. "This is the trust Grandpa established in 2002. It is the sole legal owner of Ravenhill. He transferred full ownership into it. And I have been the sole trustee since I was 21. My father didn't touch the papers, he just glared at me. "What are you talking about? We're the ones on the deed. I've paid the taxes." "You haven't paid a cent in the last 10 years, I interrupted. "I have, from the trust, and when that wasn't enough, from my personal account. Here are the statements. Bank records, tax receipts, roof repairs, electrical system upgrades, even Mrs. Jenny's wages. Everything came from me." I pushed the next stack of papers toward my mother. Her face went pale as she scanned the figures. She had always prided herself on managing the family finances, but now, the truth had pushed her far out of her comfort zone. Jacob jumped up. "Hold on, are you saying you own this place? That you get to make all the decisions? That's ridiculous. Mom and Dad planned a legal transfer. Graham, what's going on?" All eyes turned to Graham. He didn't flinch. "I verified the legal standing of the documents Charlie provided. The trust is fully valid. Ravenhill has belonged to that trust for over a decade. The Donald family is no longer the legal owner. And Charlie, as trustee, has full authority over any decisions involving this property." "This is betrayal," my father growled. "You went behind our backs and took everything, and now you come here to lecture us?" I looked straight at him, my voice low but firm. "No, Dad, I protected Ravenhill when you and Mom abandoned it. I didn't do it to take over. I did it because I believed in Grandpa's legacy, the one you always called sacred, and yet almost handed over to Jacob like it was some throwaway prize." A beat of silence. I took a deep breath. "But I'm not here to take Ravenhill back. I'm here to offer a deal." Jacob scoffed. "A deal? What, you think you're the queen now?" I ignored him and turned to my parents. "If Jacob still wants to live here, I won't stop him. But there are conditions. 1. He must respect the historical integrity of Ravenhill. Any major renovations must be reviewed and approved. 2. He must share financial responsibility for maintenance, no more living comfortably off someone else's back. 3. My role must be clearly acknowledged. No more treating me like the museum girl." My mother closed her eyes. My father turned away. Jacob's face darkened, while Graham scribbled notes. "If you don't agree," I said quietly, "I'll convert Ravenhill into a heritage conservation site. No private residents allowed. Not even family." The silence stretched on, like a sentence being handed down. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice as soft as a sigh. "You've changed, Charlie." I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, but the kind that comes with relief after years of being dismissed. "No, Mom, I haven't changed, I've just stopped putting up with it." 2 days after the stormy family meeting, I returned to Ravenhill. This time with a different mindset. No longer the overlooked daughter, no longer the secret keeper, I came back as the person Grandpa trusted with authority. And now, the one deciding the fate of this house. Graham had prepared a memorandum, and I brought a revised draft of the negotiation terms I'd stayed up all night refining. The meeting took place in the library, the only room in Ravenhill where I'd ever felt truly seen. Perhaps because it still bore my grandfather's presence. My father, Donald, looked tired but calm. My mother, Marilyn, seemed more composed, though her gaze held a trace of caution. Jacob couldn't hide his irritation, but at least this time he didn't fire off a sarcastic remark when I walked in. Graham began. We're here to discuss a collaborative proposal between all parties to ensure Ravenhill is managed legally, preserved as a heritage site, and that stability is maintained within the family. I nodded and took out my draft. I've reviewed the family's counter-proposal, and I agree in principle to 3 points. First, we establish a non-profit, the Westbrook Heritage Foundation, to oversee finances, maintenance, and all operations related to Ravenhill. I looked at my father. This foundation would have a 4-member board: you, Mom, Jacob, and myself. However, any expenditure over $25,000 must be approved by at least 3 board members. Donald nodded slowly. That's fair. It gives everyone a voice, but still ensures financial oversight. Second, I continued, Jacob and Madison may proceed with their plan to move into the East Wing, with some renovation privileges, provided they don't interfere with the historically protected architecture outlined in the 2018 Preservation Review. Jacob raised an eyebrow. And who decides what qualifies as interference? I'll work with an independent preservation expert, I replied without hesitation. And all plans must be approved by the Foundation's board. He leaned back in his chair and said nothing more. Finally, I said, my voice lowering slightly, I remain the sole legal trustee of the Franklin Westbrook Trust. I retain final veto power over any major changes to Ravenhill. A wave of silence swept through the room. I knew they didn't like it, but that part wasn't up for negotiation. This was Grandpa's legacy, not a piece of land to be divvied up like a poker pot. Marilyn broke the tension with an unexpected question. And the money you spent, do you want to be reimbursed? I shook my head. No, but I want it formally documented in the Foundation's records. This is the financial contribution log over the past 10 years, totaling $537,400. That includes maintenance costs, repairs, property taxes, staff wages. I don't want a cent back, but I want the truth acknowledged. Donald sat still, eyes fixed on the spreadsheet. At last he spoke. His voice low, raspy, but no longer bitter. Charlie, I used to think you lived far away, disconnected, not really caring about Ravenhill. But it seems I was wrong. I swallowed hard. You weren't wrong, Dad, you just didn't look closely. I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I stayed away because I knew that if I stayed close, I'd always be a shadow in someone else's version of the story. Marilyn placed her hand gently on the table. Then, from now on, can we rewrite that story, together? I nodded. Graham stood gathering the papers. I'll revise the agreement based on today's terms. If there are no further disputes, we can sign it officially within the week. Jacob stood, walked toward me, and slowly held out his hand. For the first time since everything had unraveled. I'll try, not for you, but for Ravenhill. I shook his hand. For both of us, Jacob, and for Grandpa. As I left Ravenhill that afternoon, the clouds had cleared, and the sky was high and crisp. Though the cracks between me and my family wouldn't heal overnight, at least we had begun to rebuild. Not with lies but with truth. And long overdue recognition. 3 weeks after that historic negotiation, we walked together into a law office in downtown Charleston. Not as rivals battling over inheritance, but as a family trying to restore balance after years of fracture. The sleek modern glass building stood in stark contrast to the worn wooden halls of Ravenhill. But today, it marked a turning point that could not be undone. Graham Sutton had everything prepared. The charter for the Westbrook Heritage Foundation, financial commitments from each member, operating regulations, and finally, the official record of the more than $500,000 I had spent over the last 10 years to keep Ravenhill from falling apart. I wore a simple charcoal suit, my hair tied up. No longer the silent daughter at dinners filled with dismissive glances. Today I was the representative of Grandpa's will, walking into that room with full clarity of purpose. My father, Donald, looked weary but composed. My mother, Marilyn, wore lighter makeup than usual, and sat more quietly than I had ever seen her. Jacob arrived last, with his wife Madison, who had stayed neutral throughout the entire dispute. But the most unexpected presence was Catherine, Jacob's ex-wife, who came with me. Though they had divorced quietly 2 years ago, Catherine and I had remained friendly through her continued support for the museum. This time, she volunteered to be my witness and emotional support. "I know I'm no longer part of that house," she said softly as we waited outside the conference room. "But Ravenhill isn't just a place. It's memory. And memories should be preserved by someone who understands them." Graham opened the proceedings with his calm, professional tone. "We're here to formally sign the legal documents establishing the Ravenhill Preservation Trust and recognizing the new management structure." Each person signed in turn. When it was my turn, I put pen to paper with a strange feeling. Not victory, but closure. 10 years of quiet contribution, endurance, and silence. All sealed with a signature and a red stamp. When it came time to acknowledge the financial contributions, Graham looked up, his voice more formal. "We officially recognize the total contribution of $537,400 from Ms. Charlotte Westbrook. Funds, drawn entirely from her personal resources, to maintain, repair and preserve Ravenhill from 2013 to 2023. Without this contribution, the estate may not have survived to the present day." Jacob sat frozen. He said nothing, but I saw his eyes linger on the printed photo of the new roof, installed in 2017. The one I had emailed to the contractor while he and Dad were golfing in Florida. When all the documents had been signed, we remained seated in the conference room. No one rushed to leave. A quiet moment settled over people who once thought they could never sit at the same table again. Then, unexpectedly, Catherine stood up, raising her glass of water. "I know I'm no longer part of this story, but I'd like to say one thing. If anyone deserves to represent Ravenhill, not just in name but in spirit, it's Charlie. She didn't just keep the house standing. She preserved the memory and identity of this family." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak for a moment. My father nodded slightly, then stood. "I used to think you were someone who lived in the past, clinging to things that were old and fading. But today, I see. You're the only one brave enough to keep the past from being rewritten. And I know. Your grandfather was right to trust you." Madison gave me a small smile. For the first time since everything began. There was no warmth between us, but something had shifted. Maybe it was acknowledgement. Maybe quiet gratitude? As we left the office, I slowed my steps, gazing at the glass buildings reflecting the soft afternoon light of Charleston. Catherine walked beside me, carrying the folder of documents. "So it's done," she said gently. I smiled faintly. "No, it's just beginning." Ravenhill still stood, a house full of layered memories and lingering ghosts. But for the first time, I no longer felt like the one quietly tending the flame in the shadows. Now I was the one lighting the torch, standing in the grand hall, letting the old secrets become not burdens, but legacy. A legacy that wasn't perfect, but truly mine. My story wasn't just about reclaiming a piece of property. It was about reclaiming myself. A person once dismissed by her own family, forgotten in the shuffle of power and inheritance. But through every difficult decision, I learned that recognition doesn't come from demanding it. It comes from living by your values. Ravenhill was preserved, yes. But more importantly, I had protected my voice and my dignity. And that is the legacy I truly want to keep. What do you think about Charlie's decision and how she handled her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life, emotional stories about family. I always wonder, if Emma didn't exist, would my parents have loved me more? If I weren't the twin sister of someone so perfect, would I still be such a disappointment in their eyes? Since we were little, the differences between Emma and me were painfully obvious. She was the bright sunshine and I was just the faint shadow trailing behind. Emma had a sweet smile that everyone adored, a gentle voice that people wanted to listen to. She loved elegant dresses, her hair was always neatly styled, and most importantly, she always knew how to please our parents. And me, I liked ripped jeans and band t-shirts. I hated long, boring family gatherings where my parents boasted about Emma's achievements like she was the most precious gem they owned. I preferred sketching on crumpled notebook pages rather than sitting through the advanced classes my parents had mapped out for me. And because of that, I became a problem in their eyes. "Maya, why can't you be more like Emma?" Mom would ask me, disappointment heavy in her voice. I had grown used to these comparisons, but that didn't mean they didn't hurt. I just couldn't understand. Why couldn't I simply be myself and still be loved? I don't remember exactly when I started feeling suffocated in my own home, but I knew one thing for sure. Emma was the pride and joy, and I was just the misplaced piece in the perfect puzzle my parents had created. Emma had a clear path. Honors classes, outstanding extracurriculars, a long list of impressive achievements. She was in the debate club, surrounded by a circle of top students, always the shining star in school events. Teachers loved her, friends admired her. Our parents were endlessly proud of her. And me, I loved music, the raw energy of an electric guitar, the lyrics that spoke to me in ways no classroom lecture ever could. I loved drawing, messy sketches in my notebooks, even on the walls of my room when inspiration struck. I didn't want to live by the perfect schedule my parents had planned. I wanted freedom. But in their eyes, my version of freedom was a mistake. "Maya, stop locking yourself in your room, go out and socialize," Mom said as she stepped inside, her expression a mix of concern and disappointment. "I do see my friends," I replied, lowering my headphones around my neck. "I mean the kind of friends with a bright future, not the ones who just strum guitars and waste time on meaningless things." I clenched the pencil tightly in my hand. "So, if I'm not as good as Emma, if I'm not the kind of person you and Dad want me to be, does that mean I have no value?" Mom was silent for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Maya, I just want you to have a good life." "A good life according to who, me or you?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She didn't respond, but I knew. In her eyes, the only path to a good life was the one Emma was walking. And as always, I remained lost in my own family. My dad always said that being different was a sign of failure. "To be successful, you have to fit in, Maya," he would often tell me, his stern gaze peering over his thick glasses. "No one wants to hire a misfit." That wasn't just advice, it was an unspoken rule in my house. Everything about me, my clothes, my interests, even the friends I chose, was scrutinized under my parents' lens. Or rather, under the perfect standard they had set based on Emma. Emma always looked polished, sleek hair, elegant outfits, a radiant smile. And me? I liked oversized band t-shirts, ripped jeans, and leather bracelets. I preferred doodling graffiti on my notebook covers instead of neatly taking notes like Emma. I wore my headphones all the time just to drown out the endless praise about her. "Maya, you can't come to dinner dressed like that." Mom frowned one evening as I came down to grab some food. "Please, at least try to look like a young lady." I sighed, setting my plate down. "Mom, I just came to get something to eat, not attend a gala." "But what if you keep going on like this, can't you try to be a little more serious?" I didn't answer. I just turned around and went straight back to my room. My room was the only place in this house where I truly belonged. The walls were covered with posters of my favorite bands, my desk was cluttered with sketchbooks, and my electric guitar rested in the corner. Here I could be myself, without hearing constant comparisons to Emma, or reminders of how I needed to fix who I was. But even this room couldn't protect me from my parents' control. One day after school, I walked into my room and immediately knew something was wrong. I glanced around. Some of my posters were missing. The sketches I had taped to my walls were gone. My desk was rearranged so perfectly that it felt unfamiliar. I yanked open a drawer. My sketchbooks were missing. Heart pounding, I rushed downstairs. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a cup of tea. "What did you do with my stuff?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Mom looked up at me, her expression eerily calm. "I just tidied up a little. Your room was too messy." "Messy? Did you throw away my drawings?" "I didn't throw them away," she said, placing her cup of tea down, her voice as steady as if invading my privacy was the most natural thing in the world. "I just put them away. Maya, you're grown now. It's time to start focusing on what really matters." "What really matters? According to who? You?" I clenched my fists, a lump forming in my throat. "Maya, you need to think about your future," Mom sighed, as if talking to a stubborn child. "Art isn't a real career. If you keep going down this path, you won't have a future." I felt my heart sink into a deep, empty void. "Emma has a future, right?" I let out a bitter laugh. "I'm the only failure." She didn't deny it. She just said one simple sentence, but it was enough to suffocate every emotion inside me. "We just want what's best for you." But what they wanted had never been what I wanted. And maybe they never really cared to ask. I knew I didn't have a choice. Since high school, my parents had already decided that I would major in business administration, just like Emma. Not because I had any talent or passion for it, but because it was the right path in their eyes. When I got accepted into college, I barely had a say in choosing my major or my school. "Maya, you need a degree that has value," Dad had said, leaving no room for argument. "Art won't give you a stable future." I was too exhausted to fight anymore. In the end, I enrolled in the university they wanted, stepped into a program I had no passion for. But from the very first day, I knew I didn't belong there. The dry economics lectures, the endless discussions about financial markets, the soulless numbers, all of it made me feel lost. I couldn't understand the excitement Emma had whenever she talked about her classes. I couldn't picture myself spending my entire life doing this. But that didn't matter to my parents. The only thing they cared about was that I followed their plan. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the library, struggling to get through a dull textbook, Emma appeared. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me and took the seat across from mine. "Maya, are you okay?" she asked gently. I looked up and shrugged. "I'm fine." Emma tilted her head, studying me. "You're not fine. You hate it here." I let out a short, humorless laugh, not even bothering to deny it. "So what are you going to say? That I should try harder? That I should accept this because it's the best path?" She didn't answer right away. "It's not that I don't understand you, Maya. I know you're different from me. But have you ever considered that sometimes we have to do what needs to be done, even if we don't like it?" I clenched my pen tighter. "But this is my life, Emma. I don't want to live a life where I have no say." Emma sighed. "I just want to help you." "How? By convincing me to follow the path Mom and Dad planned?" I looked straight into her eyes. "Are you really happy, Emma?" She hesitated at my question. A moment passed and then she smiled. But it wasn't her usual bright, confident smile. "Happiness isn't always the most important thing, Maya," she said softly. "Sometimes, doing the right thing matters more." I fell silent, unsure of how to respond. After that conversation, something shifted inside me. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep letting other people decide my life for me. For the first time, I started thinking about how to break free from the plan they had mapped out for me. I had started thinking about how to escape their plan, but I didn't really know what to do. Until I met Liam. It was a sweltering afternoon. I was exhausted from endless lectures and decided to wander around instead of heading back to my dorm. I walked along a small street near campus, the kind with independent coffee shops and old record stores that business students rarely visited. The roar of a motorcycle engine snapped me out of my thoughts. I turned my head and saw a guy pulling up in front of a small repair shop across the street. Leather jacket, faded jeans, wind-tousled hair. He took off his helmet, ran a hand through his hair, and glanced around. There was something about him. The freedom, the confidence, or maybe just the way he seemed completely unbothered by the world around him, that made it impossible to look away. I didn't realize how long I had been staring until he caught my gaze. A faint smirk crossed his lips before he picked up his helmet and walked toward me. "You like bikes?" he asked, his voice deep, slightly teasing. I shrugged. "Not really, but I like the feeling of freedom." He chuckled as if I had said something amusing. "Freedom, huh? Are you looking for it or running from something?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't used to conversations like this. It wasn't like the superficial discussions at university where everyone tried to sound impressive. His question actually made me think. "Oh, I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe both." He nodded as if he understood me better than I understood myself. "Name's Liam," he said, extending his hand. I took it. The roughness of his calloused palm was nothing like the polished, formal handshakes I was used to. "Maya." He studied me for a moment, then tilted his head toward his bike. "Ever been on a motorcycle before?" I shook my head. "Then you're missing out." Liam held out his spare helmet, his eyes glinting with challenge. "Wanna try?" I looked at the bike, then back at him. Everything I had ever been taught screamed at me to say no. This was a stranger. A motorcycle. A reckless decision. But there was a part of me, the part I had spent years suppressing, that wanted to scream yes. And for the first time in my life, I listened to my instincts. I slid the helmet over my head, climbed onto the bike, and before I could second-guess myself, Liam twisted the throttle. The motorcycle roared to life, the wind rushing past my face, the city shrinking behind me. I closed my eyes, feeling the speed, the vibration of the engine beneath me. Freedom. For the first time, I truly felt it. I didn't know exactly when my feelings for Liam became something more than just long rides on empty roads, or late nights by the river talking about dreams we had kept buried, but one day when I realized I couldn't imagine a future without him, I knew. I was in love. Liam wasn't like anyone I had ever known. He didn't have a long-term plan, didn't care about titles or achievements. He lived in the moment, taking each day as it came, as if it was all he needed. He worked as a mechanic at a small garage. A simple job, but one that brought him real joy. I admired that freedom, the ease with which he moved through life, while I had spent my youth fighting against the expectations forced upon me. And I knew my parents would never accept him. But I still tried. I brought Liam home one Saturday evening. As he stepped into the living room, wearing a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual leather jacket, I could feel the tension settle in the air immediately. My mom straightened on the couch, her eyes scanning him from his slightly tousled hair to his worn-out boots. My dad put his newspaper down, adjusting his glasses. No one spoke for the first few seconds. Liam smiled politely and extended his hand. "I'm Liam, nice to meet you both." My dad didn't shake his hand. "What do you do for a living?" he asked, his tone already laced with judgment. "I'm a mechanic," Liam answered without hesitation. My mother inhaled sharply, as if he had just said something horrifying. "Mechanic," my father repeated slowly, as if testing the word. "Do you have any plans for the future? A concrete goal? Or do you intend to just live like this forever?" Liam remained unfazed. "I love what I do, I'm good at it, and it gives me a decent life. I don't need anything more than that to be happy." That answer was the equivalent of blasphemy in my house. "You think that's enough?" My mom shook her head, her voice trembling with disappointment. "Maya, are you serious? You're willing to throw everything away to be with someone who has no stable future?" A slow burn of anger started rising inside me. "Liam has his own future, Mom. It just doesn't look like the one you tried to force on me." My father stood up, his eyes hard. "Maya, do you even realize what you're doing? You're about to ruin your life over a fleeting emotion." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Did it ever cross your mind that maybe all I'm trying to do is find my own happiness? No. My father's voice was cold. Because you're making a mistake. My mother started to cry, while Emma, who had been silent the entire time, kept her head down. I love Liam, I said firmly. And we're getting married. My mother's hands fell to her lap, as if she had just heard the worst possible news. My father slowly shook his head. If you walk out of this house with him, don't bother coming back. The words didn't surprise me. I had expected them. But expecting something didn't mean it didn't hurt. I turned to Emma, searching for something. Support? Comfort? Or at least some sign that she understood. But she only looked at me with sad eyes, saying nothing. Liam gently took my hand. Maya, if you're not sure. I squeezed his hand tightly. I'm sure. I took one last look at the house I had grown up in, at the people who had once been my whole world. But now, I was no longer part of theirs. Without looking back, I stepped over the threshold. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. My new life with Liam began in a small apartment on the second floor of an old building. It wasn't spacious. It wasn't luxurious. And it was nothing like the house I had grown up in. But it was ours. At first, nothing was easy. I left without any support from my family. My bank account held only a small amount of savings that I had secretly kept over the years. I got a job as a waitress at a small cafe in the city, nothing prestigious but enough to support myself. Liam continued working as a mechanic, taking on extra repair jobs in the evenings to bring in more income. We scraped by day, paying rent, covering utility bills, and learning how to live as frugally as possible. But strangely enough, despite the struggles, I had never felt so free. No more tense family dinners with my parents' judgmental stares. No more constant reminders that I had to live up to a standard I had never wanted to follow. I woke up every morning in Liam's arms, went to a simple but fulfilling job, and came home at night to hear him talk about the cars he had worked on that day. And most importantly, I had a real family. A family that didn't expect me to be anyone but myself. Liam's mother, Margaret, was one of the first people to welcome me with open arms. She lived in the suburbs, in a small but cozy house with a garden full of golden chrysanthemums. The first time I met her, I felt something different. There were no judgmental looks, no interrogating questions, like the ones my parents had always thrown at me. You must be Maya, she said with a warm smile, pulling me into a gentle hug. Liam has told me so much about you. I was taken aback by her warmth. It was nothing like the way my own mother had ever hugged me. Hers always felt more like a formality, rather than genuine affection. Over time, Margaret became someone I could confide in. On weekend afternoons we cooked together in her small kitchen, talking about everything and nothing. She never asked why I left home, never told me that I should go back. She just listened. And sometimes, that was all I needed. As the months passed, our lives started to stabilize. Liam worked hard and was eventually promoted to a management position at the auto shop, significantly increasing his income. We saved every penny we could, and after 2 years, we finally had enough to buy a small house in the suburbs. A place of our own, no longer just a temporary apartment. The first time I stepped into our new home, I stood in the empty living room, feeling like I was dreaming. Liam wrapped his arms around my waist, a soft smile on his face. Can you believe it? We actually did it. I turned to look at him, feeling the warmth of the man I loved. I can, I whispered. We built this life ourselves. The life I chose. I hadn't thought about my family in a long time. My life with Liam was too busy, too happy for me to dwell on the past I had left behind. But fate has a way of dragging back the things we try to forget. That day, I was making coffee in my small kitchen when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Emma. I hesitated. She rarely called me. Since I left, our relationship had been reduced to brief, polite messages. I picked up. Emma? There was a moment of silence on the other end before she spoke, her voice so tense that I immediately sensed something was wrong. Maya. Dad has been accused. I tightened my grip on the phone. Accused? Emma sighed. He's being investigated for harassing a student. The story has made the news, the university is looking into it and… It doesn't look good. I didn't know what to say. The image of my father, the stern, prideful man who placed his reputation above all else, flashed through my mind. I wasn't surprised. He had always believed his power was untouchable. But now, the truth had surfaced. Emma continued. Mom and Dad are in serious trouble. His reputation is ruined, and he's been suspended from the university. I tried to help, but my husband doesn't want to get involved. He said this could damage his career. I let out a bitter smirk. So you turned your back on them too? Emma didn't respond. I sighed. Why are you calling me? Maya. Her voice was hesitant. Mom and Dad need help. They have nothing left. I can't help them, but maybe you can? I laughed. A short, humorless laugh. You're joking, right? They disowned me, remember? They said I wasn't their daughter anymore just because I chose a life they didn't approve of. Maya, I know, Emma said softly. But they're still our parents. No. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. They were only my parents when I followed the path they laid out for me. The moment I stepped off that path, they erased me from their lives. And now that they've lost everything, they suddenly remember me? Emma didn't argue. Maybe she understood the truth better than anyone. I took a deep breath. I don't owe them anything, Emma. I built my life on my own, without them, and I have no reason to go back now. There was a long silence on the other end before Emma finally exhaled. I understand. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. Maybe, even if she didn't say it, she felt the same way I did. That all those years we spent trying to make them proud had only brought us pain. Before hanging up, I said one last thing. If they really need help, they can go to the daughter they always cherished. Then I set my phone down and turned back to my now cold coffee. Not a single trace of regret. 3 years later, on a warm spring morning, I sat on the wooden porch, a steaming cup of coffee in my hands, watching Liam play with our little boy in the yard. Noah, with the same bright blue eyes as his father, laughed uncontrollably as Liam lifted him high into the air, spun him around, and gently set him down on the lush green grass. We had come a long way since the day I walked out of my parents' house without looking back. It had been a difficult choice, but I had never regretted it. I had built my life from nothing, alongside a man who truly loved me for who I was, not for the expectations others had placed upon me. This small house in the suburbs was the result of years of hard work. Liam had continued working tirelessly, becoming the lead mechanic at the auto shop before eventually opening his own repair business. As for me, after working as a waitress for some time, I finally found a job I truly loved. Managing a small art shop in town, where I could spend my days surrounded by creativity and talking to people who shared my passion. My life wasn't wealthy, wasn't extravagant, but it was genuinely happy. I still thought about my parents from time to time, but there was no more pain. I had accepted that they couldn't change, just as I could never be the daughter they wanted me to be. News of them occasionally surfaced. My father had lost his job, and my mother had quietly distanced herself from the elite circles she once prided herself on. Emma still kept in touch, but we avoided speaking about the past. I had learned to let go. Noah ran up to me, his tiny feet covered in grass stains. "Mom, look what I found!" I bent down, ruffling his hair. In his small hands was a delicate daisy, its white petals swaying gently in the breeze. "Oh, it's beautiful," I said, smiling at him. Liam walked over, wrapping his arms around me from behind, resting his chin lightly on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" I leaned into him, feeling the familiar warmth. "Just that. I'm happy." He gave my hand a gentle squeeze and kissed the top of my head. "Me too." I looked out at the garden, where the sunlight danced through the trees. where my son ran freely without a care in the world, where I had finally found the peace I once thought I'd never have. I had chosen my own path, and I knew I had chosen right. Maya's journey is a testament to the power of choosing your own path, despite imposed expectations. She walked away from a life that was mapped out for her to pursue true happiness, building a family founded on love and understanding. Her story reflects the reality of many young people. Those who bravely step out of their comfort zones, face loss, and ultimately find themselves. In the end, Maya not only found freedom but also proved that happiness isn't about perfection. It's about living authentically. What do you think about Maya's journey? Would you have the courage to give up everything to pursue your own happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about life, family, and the choices that shape our destiny. I never thought I'd find myself standing in my parents' living room, watching them calmly tell me that the $150,000 meant for my future was gone, vanished, disappeared, and worst of all, it wasn't stolen by some stranger. It was taken by my own parents and transferred into my sister Sophia's account to help her buy a house with her fiancé. It felt like a punch to the gut. Was that house worth more than my future? My whole body went numb, as my mother, in the same casual tone she'd used to announce what was for dinner, said, "Elizabeth, you're still in school. You can just take out loans like everyone else. You'll pay them off once you start working. There's no need to make a big deal out of this, sweetheart." No need to make a big deal out of it? I tried to stay calm, but my chest tightened as if an invisible rope was squeezing every breath out of me. They had taken the money my grandparents had left for me, the money that was supposed to fund my dreams, the future I had been planning for years. And they didn't see anything wrong with it. My grandparents were old-school Americans who valued education above all else. They always believed that knowledge is the one thing no one can take away from you, and they worked hard to ensure I had a better future. 3 years ago my grandfather passed away after a stroke, and last year my grandmother followed him. On the day she died I spent hours in my tiny rented apartment, rereading every letter she had ever sent me. Her words were always full of love, often accompanied by small checks with notes, like, "This is for your future, Elizabeth. We know you'll do great things." And they really made it happen. When their will was read, I inherited the education fund they had been saving for me for years. A sum that was enough to cover my dream MBA program. My parents were supposed to manage the money until I needed it. I never worried about it. They were my parents. They were supposed to protect my future. But now, I realized they had prioritized my sister over me. Since childhood, Sophia had always been the center of attention. She never had to try, never had to prove herself, never had to struggle. My parents spoiled her unconditionally. She failed her college entrance exams twice, dropped out of med school to study art, then dropped that too. Meanwhile, I graduated at the top of my class with a business degree from a prestigious university and landed a job at a major corporation. My parents' reaction? A shrug. "Elizabeth, you've always been smart, it's not surprising." But Sophia, the moment she mentioned wanting to become a preschool teacher, my parents called it a meaningful career and said it was worth sacrificing everything for. Sophia and her fiancé Daniel weren't poor. Daniel was a manager at a local zoo, and Sophia worked as an assistant director at a small private school. They had stable incomes, but not enough to buy the dream home they kept talking about at every family dinner. They constantly complained about housing prices, about being trapped in the rental cycle, about how they deserved a home of their own. Every dinner at my parents' house turned into a discussion about Sophia's dream house. And me? I never once worried about my MBA fund because it wasn't my parents' money. It was my grandparents' legacy for me. I thought it would be there when I needed it. But I was wrong. 2 weeks ago, I started preparing my MBA applications. I needed to check my fund balance because just the application fees for top schools ran into the thousands. That night, when I asked about it, my father mumbled, "Just submit your applications first and we'll figure it out later." My mother quickly changed the subject, talking about how Sophia and Daniel had found the perfect house but needed a large down payment. My stomach sank. I tried to push away the worst thoughts. Maybe they were just delaying things? Maybe they had put the money somewhere safer? But my gut told me something was wrong. The following week, I went back. This time, I didn't beat around the bush. Mom, Dad, my money is still there, right? My mother sighed, as if I had asked something ridiculous. Elizabeth, I lent it to your sister. Sophia and Daniel need this house. Do you have any idea how high property prices are right now? Without our help, they'd never be able to afford it. I froze. My father shrugged. You are still in school, but you already have a stable job. You can take out student loans and pay them off over time. It's not a big deal. I was stunned. They had taken all the money. They had stolen my dream, and they didn't even feel guilty about it. I stared at my parents, waiting for a reasonable explanation, but there was nothing. No remorse, no shame. They just looked at me as if I was overreacting to something trivial. Mom, Dad, this was the money my grandparents left for me. It wasn't yours. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to stay calm. My mother crossed her arms, frowning as if I were a spoiled child making unreasonable demands. Elizabeth? Don't you think Sophia deserves a little help too? You have a good job, a stable career? You can take care of yourself, but Sophia can't. She needs this support. My father nodded in agreement. We're family, sweetheart. Your sister needed the money. Shouldn't we help her? I let out a bitter laugh. Family? That was their excuse? A hollow justification for betraying me? I thought back to the day the will was read. I hadn't expected anything. My grandparents had always lived modestly, frugally, and with strong principles. But they had always emphasized the importance of education. The will was read in a small family gathering. My grandparents' lawyer announced each part of the inheritance. My parents inherited my grandparents' house and a large savings account. Sophia received my grandmother's valuable jewelry collection, items worth tens of thousands of dollars. I was given the education fund. Money my grandparents had saved specifically for me, meant to be used only for my ambition. I had been grateful. I didn't need a house or jewelry. I just wanted the opportunity to pursue my dream, just as my grandparents had wished. My parents were put in charge of managing the fund, but it wasn't theirs. They were only holding it for me until I needed it. At least, that's what I had believed. Now I saw how naive I had been. I had spent my whole life being put second to Sophia. I remembered when I was 10 years old and won a statewide science competition. My award was acknowledged with a brief, "Good job, Elizabeth." But Sophia, all she had to do was scribble a messy drawing, and my mother framed it and hung it in the living room like a masterpiece. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents barely noticed. But when Sophia dropped out of college for the second time, they comforted her with a trip to Florida to help her relax. When I landed a prestigious job, they dismissed it with, "You've always been smart, it's not surprising." But when Sophia announced she wanted to become a preschool teacher, they lost their minds. "That's such a meaningful career. You have such a kind heart, Sophia." I had grown used to it. I had accepted that in my parents' eyes, I was just the responsible one. Sophia was the one who deserved love, protection, and priority. My mother kept talking, as if she were explaining something obvious. "Elizabeth, you have to understand. Sophia has never been as lucky as you. You've always been smart, driven, and had a bright future ahead of you. But Sophia has struggled. We just wanted to help her a little." I clenched my fists, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "What about me?" I asked. "Grandma and Grandpa left that money for me. I planned my future around it. And you took it? Without even asking me?" My mother sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "You can just take out loans, Elizabeth." A surge of anger flared in my chest. "Not a big deal. You took that money without my permission. It wasn't yours. Grandma and Grandpa saved it for me because they believed in me." My father folded his arms, looking at me as if I were being dramatic. You don't need to make such a fuss. Are you really going to fight with your family over some money? I let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Some money? This was my entire future. I looked at them, and for the first time I truly saw them. They had never valued me the way they valued Sophia. I had never been their priority. They had always assumed I could handle things on my own. They had always believed I was strong, that I didn't need help. But being strong didn't mean I could be taken advantage of. I fell silent. The anger inside me no longer burned. It was cold, like a storm rolling in. They had stolen my dream. And they felt no guilt. And now they stood there, looking at me with indifference, as if I were the one in the wrong. But they were mistaken. I was no longer the little girl who once tried so hard to earn their attention. They could ignore me for years if they wanted. But now, they would see me for who I had become. I would make sure of it. I left my parents' house with rage burning inside me. They thought I couldn't do anything. They thought I would give up. They thought I was weak. But they were wrong. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual and sent a short email to Mr. Thompson, a senior executive and my mentor. Can I meet you this morning? I need your advice. Less than 10 minutes later, his secretary replied. The office is open, come in when you arrive. I stepped into his office with unwavering determination. If there was anyone who could guide me on the legal side of this, it was him. Mr. Thompson had been in the industry for over 3 decades. He wasn't just a brilliant executive, he had an extensive network, including some of the best attorneys in the city. As I told him everything, he didn't interrupt once. He simply sat there, listening, his sharp eyes filled with understanding. When I finished, he gave a small nod, his voice calm yet commanding. Elizabeth, this isn't just a financial issue. This is a betrayal, and you have every right to take back what's yours. He pulled a business card from his desk and placed it in front of me. Wilson & Partners, one of the top law firms in the city. They have a team specializing in inheritance disputes and financial misappropriation. I'll reach out to them personally for you. But He raised a hand to stop me. Don't worry about legal fees right now. Focus on gathering evidence. Once you have enough documentation, I promise, you'll have a solid case. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. But there was one more person I needed to contact. That evening, I searched for Uncle Jake's number. My father's cousin. But nothing like my father. In our family, he was one of the few who had never favored Sophia. He had always followed my career, always encouraged me. I had never asked him for anything before, but this time, I had no choice. I pressed call. After only 2 rings, his voice came through. Elizabeth, I wasn't expecting your call. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Do you have time? I need to talk to you about something serious. Within 20 minutes, we were sitting in a quiet cafe. I laid everything out for him, leaving nothing unsaid. When I finished, Uncle Jake's face darkened. They did what? His voice dropped, low and dangerous. They transferred all of my money to Sophia. No warning, no discussion. And when I demanded it back, they laughed in my face and said I didn't stand a chance if I tried to sue them. A long silence followed. I could see his hands clenching, his eyes sharp with anger. You have any evidence? I shook my head. Not yet, just their words, but I need to find proof. Uncle Jake nodded slightly, as if coming to a decision. I'll handle this. First, I'll hire a forensic accountant to go through their bank transactions. If they moved the money, we'll find it. And, you don't need to worry about legal fees. I'll cover everything. I blinked, almost unable to believe it. Are you sure? I don't want. He raised his hand, cutting me off. Elizabeth, your family. You've worked hard for years, and now you've been robbed outright. Don't worry about the money. I'm going to help you take back what's rightfully yours. The anger inside me was no longer a solitary storm. Now, I had a powerful ally. I wasn't going to let this go so easily. And my parents were about to realize that. When Uncle Jake provided a detailed financial report to the legal team at Wilson and Partners, everything became crystal clear. My parents had systematically taken my money over the course of several months. There was no way for them to deny it. They knew I had enough evidence to take them to court. And that's when they tried a different tactic, bargaining with me. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. "Elizabeth, it's your mother." I said nothing. I wanted to see what they would try next. She cleared her throat, trying to keep her voice calm. "Your father and I have been thinking a lot. We don't have to take this to court. You know, lawsuits only hurt the family." I let out a dry laugh. "Really? So when you took my money, that didn't hurt me?" She ignored my question. "We can settle this privately. Your father and I are willing to return a portion of the money." I cut her off immediately. "A portion?" I scoffed. "You took all of the money my grandparents left me, and now you want to give back a little? And expect me to stay quiet?" There was silence. Then my father's voice came through, no longer gentle. "Elizabeth, are you really going to sue your own parents? Do you think anyone will take your side when this goes public? The whole family will turn against you." I felt the fire inside me reignite. "Oh, really? Let's see how they react when they find out you've been lying to them for years." And with that, I hung up. They had lost their only chance to settle this peacefully. Not long after my parents' call, Sophia sent me a long email. Subject: Elizabeth, please think this through. I opened it and read. "I didn't know about this, I swear. Mom and Dad told me it was their savings for me. If I had known it was yours, I never would have taken it." I clenched my fists. Lies. She knew. Maybe not at first. But she knew. The moment she received the money. And more importantly, she still used it. I forwarded Sophia's email to my lawyer. It was proof that she was involved, and she wouldn't be able to deny responsibility. As the financial investigation continued, the legal team uncovered something even more shocking. My parents hadn't just stolen my MBA fund. They had been misusing my grandmother's assets before she passed away. They had started moving money from her accounts while she was still alive, taking advantage of the trust she had placed in them. A chill ran down my spine. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed my grandmother. When my lawyer submitted this report to the court, the judge immediately ordered a deeper investigation into their finances. With these new findings, the court intervened in Sophia and Daniel's home purchase. Their financial records were scrutinized, and then, the bank discovered signs of fraud in their mortgage application. Daniel panicked. He wanted nothing to do with legal trouble. I heard that he had a heated argument with Sophia, and then, the inevitable happened. He started to doubt her. "You knew that money didn't belong to your parents, didn't you?" I could imagine Daniel confronting her. And I knew she wouldn't have a reasonable answer. It wasn't just me. Our relatives were starting to see the truth too. Some of them called me, their voices filled with doubt. "Elizabeth, did you really agree to give up your tuition money for Sophia?" I smirked. "Who told you that?" "Your parents. They said you willingly gave up the money to help Sophia buy a house. They also said you were just jealous, because your sister was about to have a home of her own." I let out a cold laugh. "Do you want the truth? I never agreed to anything. They took my money, and now I'm taking back what's mine." Their lies were starting to unravel. Family members began asking questions. They no longer trusted my parents. And I didn't stop. My lawyers had prepared a solid case. I was taking them to court. And I knew they were terrified. My parents had never believed I would actually go through with it. On the day of the ruling, I sat upright in my seat, watching my parents stand before the judge. They looked more exhausted than I had ever seen them. Throughout the trial, my lawyers had presented clear evidence, proof that my parents had embezzled my MBA fund, transferred the money into Sophia's account, and engaged in financial fraud, even before my grandmother's passing. The judge had no patience for them. "Your actions are not only a betrayal of your own daughter but also a disgrace to the final wishes of the deceased." Her voice echoed across the courtroom. I glanced at my parents. My mother hung her head low, while my father clenched his fists. Then, the final verdict was delivered. They were ordered to repay the full $150,000 along with penalties. They were held legally responsible for the financial mismanagement of my grandmother's estate. If they couldn't pay, they would have to sell their assets to cover the debt. My mother collapsed into her chair, completely broken. I didn't look away. This was justice. 2 months later, their house was seized for sale. The very house they had inherited from my grandparents, the one they had once proudly called the symbol of their happy family, was no longer theirs. I heard they had desperately tried to borrow money from friends and relatives, but after the truth was exposed, no one was willing to help them. People distanced themselves. Neighbors whispered about them whenever they stepped outside. One of my mother's old friends once sent me a message. "Elizabeth, your mother seems really devastated, but honestly, she brought this on herself." I didn't reply. They deserved every consequence. Sophia lost her job just a week after the court ruling. When the school board discovered that she had received money from fraudulent sources, they quickly reviewed her ethical standing. A preschool teacher involved in a financial fraud case? No parent wanted their child to be taught by someone like that. Her termination was immediate. A former colleague of Sophia's messaged me. "Sophia's school held an emergency meeting. The parents are furious. They're calling her a liar and saying she's untrustworthy." And just like that, Sophia's dream of a meaningful career was gone. Daniel wasn't doing any better. As soon as the financial scandal broke, the zoo where he worked suspended him while investigating whether he had been involved in the fraud. I heard he was furious when the bank withdrew their mortgage approval, forcing them to return the apartment they had just moved into. And then the inevitable happened. Their engagement fell apart. A mutual friend happened to witness them arguing in a cafe. Daniel was yelling at Sophia. "Why did you lie to me? You knew that money wasn't your parents'. If I lose my job over this, it's your fault." Sophia screamed back in desperation. "You're a coward. Why aren't you standing by me? This is my family's business. Who are you to judge?" But Daniel had had enough. That very night, he packed his things and left the apartment. Their engagement was officially over. I wasn't surprised. They shared the same ambition, but had no loyalty to each other. The consequences of the trial weren't just financial. They lost their reputations. My father had once been respected as a businessman in the community. Now, no one wanted anything to do with him. His golf club revoked his membership. My mother, who had been the treasurer of the local women's association, was forced to resign. Old friends avoided them like the plague. One acquaintance told me, "Elizabeth, your parents barely leave the house anymore. Everyone knows what they did. They have no one left on their side." I felt no pity. They did this to themselves. 3 months after the lawsuit ended, I officially received my acceptance letter from the MBA program I had dreamed of. My company stood by me the entire time. Mr. Thompson told me, "The way you handled this shows that you have the qualities of a true leader." And most importantly, I was no longer bound to my parents. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their fake love. They could live with the consequences of their choices. As for me, I was moving forward, stronger than ever. 3 months after the court ruling, I officially received the full MBA fund back, along with additional compensation from my parents. The money had returned to where it rightfully belonged. But I hadn't just reclaimed my money. I had reclaimed my future. One early morning, I opened my email, my heart pounding, as I saw a message from the university I had dreamed of attending. I took a deep breath before clicking it open. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into our MBA program with a scholarship for outstanding achievement." I read that line 3 times. Then, laughter bubbled up inside me. A feeling of pure relief filling my chest. My parents had tried to steal my opportunity. But in the end, I hadn't just taken it back. I had earned it, through my own efforts. I immediately called Mr. Thompson. "I knew you'd do it, Elizabeth." His voice brimmed with pride. "Then," he added, "and you should know that after you finish your MBA, an executive position is waiting for you at the company." I froze. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "You've proven yourself. You have strategic thinking, decisiveness, and most importantly, you don't give up when faced with adversity. That's what makes a true leader. I could hardly believe my ears. I hadn't just won back my MBA fund. I had secured a strong career path before the program had even begun. Uncle Jake had been by my side throughout this entire journey. When I told him about the scholarship and the promotion offer, he laughed. "Now do you see how valuable you are?" I nodded, truly grateful. Then he added, "But don't stop there. After you graduate, we'll talk about investments. I want you to expand your career, not just within this company, but beyond." I felt my heart race with excitement. This wasn't just a victory. This was a beginning. With the compensation from my parents and my current salary, I decided to reward myself with something I truly deserved: a new apartment. I didn't buy a lavish mansion. I chose a high-end apartment in a quiet, safe neighborhood, a place where I could finally enjoy my life. It had a spacious balcony overlooking a park, with sunlight streaming through the windows every morning. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of my freedom. And the first thing I did when I moved in, I blocked my parents' numbers. No calls, no emails, no messages. I owed them nothing. They had chosen to cast me aside. Now, I was simply returning the favor. I heard about them through others. My parents were forced to leave the house they once took pride in. They moved into a smaller apartment, withdrawn from society. Because everyone around them now knew the truth. No one trusted them anymore. The women's group my mother used to be part of refused to let her rejoin. My father's golf club revoked his membership. Even the friends they once considered close gradually distanced themselves. A relative told me, "Elizabeth, your parents aren't the same anymore. Your mother barely leaves the house. Your father spends hours sitting alone in a cafe, staring into the distance." I didn't react. I felt nothing anymore. They had made their choices with full intent. Now, they were living with the consequences. One Sunday morning, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping my coffee. I gazed into the distance, savoring the peace I had reclaimed for myself. They could call me a traitor. They could drown in their belated regrets. But I didn't care anymore. I had taken back my life, and no one would ever take it from me again. Elizabeth's story is not just a legal battle, it's a journey of reclaiming self-worth. It highlights a harsh reality. Not everyone prioritizes family, and not every family deserves unconditional loyalty. Her parents' betrayal proves that greed and favoritism can destroy even the strongest bonds. But Elizabeth's triumph stands as proof that justice, resilience, and independence will always be the foundation for reclaiming what rightfully belongs to us. What are your thoughts on family, justice, and fairness? Have you ever witnessed favoritism or injustice in your own life? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.